it's Julia from South Square Crafts. I'm so happy to be back on the TheAlleyWayStamps YouTube channel, and today I am sharing a card I created using the Oinkers stamp set. The Oinkers stamp set is one of the mini stamp sets that the TheAlleyWayStamps offers. One of the really cool things about these sets is that they're fairly inexpensive, so you can kind of round out your collection fairly quickly. If you're like me and you're a newest stamper, sometimes it's nice to have a few of the smaller sets rather than one of the large ones, and that way you get many more stamps in your collection more quickly. I'm starting my project stamping using Versa Fine Onyx Black ink onto some watercolor paper, and then I'm sprinkling on some Wow clear embossing powder. I'm going to stamp out 3 pigs and then also the bird that comes in the stamp set, and all of these characters and greetings that I'm using today are all part of the same Oinkers stamp set. I applied the embossing powder to that first pig that I stamped just so that it wouldn't dry before I had a chance to stamp out all of the other images and sprinkle on the embossing powder. So I haven't actually heat set that yet, but now that I've finished sprinkling on the embossing powder onto the 3 other characters, I'll go ahead and zap that with my heat tool. Next, I've pulled out some distress inks. I love these distress inks because you can use them in so many different ways. And again, this is one of these things where, especially if you buy the minis, you get 4 per pack. And so you find that very quickly you're rounding out your collection and you have a lot of colors to play with. I am going to just add a little bit of water to the inks that I mashed out onto a piece of laminated paper, and I'm going to use the spun sugar to just create a little base layer on each of those pigs, and then I'm going to go back in and add some of the picked raspberry color to add a little bit of shadowing to each of the pigs. On these, I wanted to kind of have a sort of loose, natural look, so I wasn't that particular about how the colors blended, especially because it's 2 pinks. I really just let the water do the magic in this case, and I'm really happy with how these pigs turned out in the end. They turned out really cute and they look round and just adorable, I think. For the bird, I'm going to pull out a few more distress inks. In this case, I'm going to use Fired Brick, tea dye, and mustard seed. So I'll use the fired brick for the bottom part of the bird, and then I'll go back in with the tea dye on the top part. And for the little beak, I mix the mustard seed and the tea dye. And again, I just mashed out some of that ink, and I'm using a paintbrush with water. My water is just off to the side there, and just applying my color. If I want to add more shadowing, I just use less water and it adds a little bit of a darker area. You can see I kind of got a little bit of that fired brick onto the face of the bird, but I was kind of happy when I pulled that away because I thought it added like a little bit of life to the bird, kind of like a rosy cheek. So I just left it, and I'm really happy with how this bird turned out in the end. So I think that that was a happy accident. I have a almost dry baby wipe off to the side that I use to just pick up any water that pools on that on those images. Because I heat emboss the stamped area, sometimes you can get some pooling in those little images, so it's nice just to have that cloth that just kind of sucks that water away. I'm going to go ahead and start work on my card base now. I'm using a piece of 110-pound cardstock, and I have it open so that the face is facing up. I am layering over top a stencil from the Crafters Workshop. This stencil really reminds me of burlap and what actually inspired this card. I was kind of excited to also show how you can use distress inks in a couple different ways for the same project. I'm just laying everything out over top of my stencil so that I have an idea of where I will be stamping that greeting, and then I'm using a little bit more post-it tape to mask off that greeting area. Next, I'm going to use some white acrylic caulking. Using acrylic caulking is for me a dead ringer for embossing paste. I think that it works exactly the same. You can mix it in with your inks exactly how you do with the embossing paste, but if you're like me and you live in a small town and you don't always have access to the latest and greatest supplies, this is a great alternative. It's very inexpensive and available at pretty much any hardware store. Another kind of cool thing about it is that it is available in a few different colors, but if you're like me, I just like to use the white and then I mix in whatever color I want to use. I'm just using my palette knife to apply the colored acrylic caulking over top of my stencil. I'm trying to have a relatively even layer over top of the stencil, and I'm just using the side of my palette knife to brush off any of the excess. I went ahead and pulled off that stencil so that I could wash it right away, and I'm kind of tempting fate here because I'm stamping my greeting, which is Hogs and Kisses, before that background stenciling is dry. I just wanted to have the front of the card all ready to go so that when it was dry, I could just finish by assembling everything together. My background is now dry, so I'm going to move on to adhere the characters to the front of my card. I love these little pig critters and I think they're just adorable. I'm adhering them down using some foam tape that I already applied. I again buy this foam tape from the hardware store, so I think it's really convenient, especially if you're like me and in a smaller town where you don't necessarily have access to everything. I wanted to have that bird kind of standing on top of the big pig, so I used a little liquid adhesive just to hold those legs down. Because I had that last pig left over and he was already painted, I wanted to go ahead and finish the inside of the card. So once I finish the front with a little wink of Stella, I'm going to use my permanent tape adhesive to adhere down that pig right into the inside of my card, and then I'm going to use the Oink stamp from the Oinkers stamp set to finish it off. So that finishes my card for today. Thank you so much for tuning into this YouTube video. I hope that I've inspired you to maybe use your stamps and inks in more than one way. And I will see you back here again on the TheAlleyWayStamps YouTube channel next week. Thanks so much. Bye.